month of our Entomology series. We've got some great speakers lined up that John Gray was generous enough to kind of organize and get together. So we've got some great speakers coming up, but tonight, one that some of you may have heard on the general bug series, but tonight is going to focus on the mayflies with a lot of knowledge of trout, bugs, and the Saluda River right here. So with that, I'll turn it to Mr. Bill Clendenin.
See there from the numbers, there's a bunch of species.
Good, great.
Now, there's a lot more species of caddisflies, but we got 185 documented species here in South Carolina, and they got 207 in North Carolina. I know 5. So if you're expecting some whiz bang talk on 185 species of mayflies, they said they have banana pushovers. Okay, if you look at the distribution of mayflies in North America, the greatest concentration of mayflies is east of the Mississippi River. And of course there's South Carolina, North Carolina, and then up through the trout fishing states of Pennsylvania, New York, and then up into Canada. We're looking at a cycle, and as fishermen, we think about this cycle. And we start with the egg, and that produces the nymph. That nymph crawls around the bottom anywhere from 6 to 9 months before it swims to the surface and emerges as a dun. Then that dun emerges again into a spinner, and then finally the life cycle takes care until we get back to the egg. We're interested in the nymph in the water, the emerger, the dun, and this poor dead fellow over here. Now, John Gray, do you recognize this mayfly?
There's a lot of pressure right here.
If you saw this blue-winged, light olive brown guy down at the river, what would you think it was?
Well, if it's blue-winged and gray, it might be a blue-winged olive.
It might be. And I'll tell you right now, what you're going to see tonight are a lot of bugs that look the same.
Yeah.
This, however, is a blue quip. And this is how you start to identify them, and you can start taking them apart. Do they have a hind wing? How many tails do they have? What's the color of that wing? The difficulty is the blue quill and the BWOs, which John just mentioned, catch at the same time. And if you all are fishing up in North Carolina or northern Georgia, you're going to run into this bug. Now there's blue-wing olive. Notice 2 tails, a very subdued hind wing. This is a male, got great big tomato eyes, and that's the character of him. And he's also, if you notice, a couple of sizes smaller. All right, we'll talk about blue wings for a minute. They're swimmers. The nymphs can be one of 4 critters. They can be crawlers, clingers, swimmers, or burrowers. These guys are swimmers. They're seen in the drift a lot. So, when in doubt, put on a small pheasant tail and drift it in your nymph package. One of the things that I'm going to do tonight is I try to use your finger as a scale. People go, I can't imagine an inch, or I can't imagine an inch and a half. But you can imagine the end of your finger. So, there's your scale. You got fat fingers, well, have it. Okay. My favorite nymph for blue-winged olives is this Pat Dorsey fly. It's a mercury pheasant tail with a little strip. Tie these down to about 22, 24. They work really good. Now, as the season goes on, the color of the bug changes. You can find green ones, and you can find brown ones, and the wing color changes. That gets us into the habit of these guys want to dry those wings once they hatch, and so once they do a lot of floating. They float on the surface, and that's, if you get there when they're eating blue wing olives, you can have a fun time fishing dry flies. And really, is it a dry fly or is it an emerger? An emerger sits in the film. A dry fly stands on its legs above the film. So most of the things that we call dry flies are actually more emergers than they are dry flies. Here's the bunny done, which I really like. It's a simple tie. The parachute is a little harder to tie. And then we have two great imitators, which is the Adams and the purple haze. Now, I've done real well down on the Saluda with using the purple haze. So I haven't done real well using an Adams, but purple haze I have. We have spinners. Once they molt again, they then take on their mating colors and they start to turn brown. And as for the fly, you can produce a small brown spinner. Ed Engel, in one of his books, pointed out that maybe you should fish a spinner during the hatch itself so it looks different than all the other bugs that are on the surface. I've done this on the Saluda and actually lucked out and caught one. Now, we get into the brown bugs of spring. Again, for all practical purposes, that's the distance between your first and second knuckles. The blue quill is a small bug. He's got 3 tails. You can see a larger pronounced wing. He's a crawler. That means you can see him in the drift. And therefore, a nice brown, small, 18, 20 brown. Well, let's just say it. Cut down on the number of flies. Pheasant tail. That's just what you need. Then you can fish the dry flies. Now, I have marked this one as a traditional because it's the upwing. It's a catskill, but it's not a classic. I'll point out a classic catskill to you later on. Of course, there again is the bunny comparadine. A bug that we do have in abundance on the Saluda is the March brown. We have lots of March browns. But the problem is if they start hatching with another of the mayflies, you just have to hope they'll stick on the March brown and not go off on blue wings like they did on me one afternoon. And as you can see, figure for scale, that's a pretty good sized bug. It also is a clinger. And one interesting thing is about them, these guys are kind of like the linebackers. They've got no neck, you know. But I put an M there. What they do is, the clingers like to stick on rocks and around rocks, but they will physically move to calmer water to hatch. So therefore, the clingers will get into the drift because in this migration to calmer water to drift. Again, here a variation on a pheasant tail or a soft tackle will, at these times, should produce fish for you. I was reading a Yankee blog last year, and he was bragging up how he had caught quite a number of fish on a hair wing emerger during the blue, during the March brown hatch. Then, of course, if you're a fly tyer and you like to dabble with stuff, there is the tilt wing dun and the hair wing dun that you can fish with. It produces an ugly spinner. I mean, that's such a pretty dun to a clear wings and a brown body. It is known as the big red spinner when you see it. I've never seen one of these. I've seen lots of March Browns on the Saluda, but I've never seen a spinner. The next one that you might see where you have clear water, clean water, is the Quill Gordon. Quill Gordon is characterized by two tails and this nice little beige fringe on its hind wing. It doesn't like pollution at all. It's unique in that it's the only one of these nymphs that has two tails. It also is a clinger. And what happens, it emerges underwater. So saying there's a nymph for it, I would say you're better off fishing a soft tackle during the period if you go with a dry dropper rig instead of that. Now here is, and if you're a fly tyer, like I am, one of those addicts, I don't need fly tyers, but is a classic catskill. And the classic catskill, they do not put the string to the eye. They leave a gap, an exposed piece of hook right up front. It was the way they tied onto the fly was the reason they left that bare. The last one here that we'll see in the brown bugs is the Hendricks. It looks awful similar to the others, about the same size. It has three tails. It has a neat looking nymph. The nymph actually has a white band on its abdomen. And where they fish for these, they tie a nymph with a white band on the abdomen. Of course, they have an emerger for it, and they have this again, emerger dry fly. This one I just discovered in the last 3 months since I was asked to do this talk. This is Borscher's parachute. It's out of Michigan. It's also called the Michigan Adams. And it's tied to imitate all those spring brown bugs. And what's unique about it is it's tied with turkey tail. The abdomen here, to get a mottled look, that's turkey tail. And you can either tie it with grizzly or you can tie it with a mix of brown and grizzly. But I read up on this a little bit, and Kelly Gallup says this fly would probably outfish the Adams. Of course, as we move into spring, as I heard up on the Davidson one time, the old boy said, we're going to get into them yeller bugs. And so we start with the Cahill. The Cahill is on the Saluda. And it's, when it's hatching, they hatch sporadically, but if you can get enough of them going, it gets the trout's attention and they come up for them. And it's quite a bit of fun. It's a clinger. And again, it moves to calmer water to hatch. But here's what's interesting. We bring out the old Hares Ear Nymph and the Hares Ear soft tackle to imitate this. So now, what we're dealing with, how many nymphs are we dealing with? Pheasant tail, Hares Ear, 2. It, like the blue wing olive, will float on the surface quite a while to get its wings to dry, and it'll flutter. It'll literally, I've seen them down there, they'll be floating along, and they'll just go to fluttering. Well, that's a mistake. And of course, we get our emergers, we get our parachutes, and then we get our sparkle gun, comparaduns, and these work well on on the Saluda. Now, we have a yellow bug on the Saluda. I don't know which one of these it is. There are a number of yellow, two-tailed, yellow-winged mayflies, and they're referred to as pale-eating dun. They're also referred to as yellowquib. There's about 5 or 6 different species, depending on where you are, that's called a pale-eating dun. And if y'all fish out west, you're all familiar with pale morning dun, which is prince of the sky. Again, it's a clinger, and you can tie some pretty. All you have to do is start changing the color of your pheasant tail. Pheasant tail you can get in a variety of colors. You can get it from the normal, natural pheasant tail, black, green, yellow. They dye the whole group. I even got lucky enough to get some that were tan, and I'll tie up half pheasant tail, half hare's ear. They have some pretty emergers and dry flies. I will tell you this, that I have never seen one of these yellow bugs on the water on this Saluda. I've seen them in the air, I've seen them down on the concrete, but I've never seen one floating on the water. Now, they are referred to as a sulfur, again, the yellow bug. And here again, here's a female, pale wings. Notice here, 3 tails. The male is quite pretty. Light blue wings, 3 tails. Notice when we had, I don't know if you all remember, when we had the fella come down from South Holston years ago and give some talk, he pointed out that when you tie your sulfurs, you should have a contrast between the thorax and the abdomen. Always put a little amber or a little sulfur gold in there. And he says that helps. And you can see here that the natural does have that color change. He's a crawler, so that means he's seen in the drift. And again, I'm using the same nymph that we used for the other yellow bugs for this guy. The trouble is with the sulfur is he has a hard time emerging. And I was talking to Greg here a while back, and he said he'd been up fishing on the Holston, and they were fishing a split back nymph. Of course, then again, you've got your soft tackle, and then your clink hammer type emergers. And when I was up on the Davison, the guy taught me how to tie the CDC comparative. And of course, our dead fellow, he looks like that. Okay, another question for John Gray. He's the one that got me into this. So, okay, the eastern green drake. What's the common name for this?
I've always heard it called the green drake.
It's the coffin flight.
Yeah.
This is the dun. Here's the spinner.
There you go.
They've seen it, and the beautiful classic catskill of that. Then, of course, we have the hex, big old bug. Trouble is with the last one and this guy, they're burrowers, so they can't take pollution at all. It's probably the reason we don't have them in abundance down on the Saluda, but they are up on the lake. Matter of fact, I've seen this guy down on Lake Moultrie. Big flies. These are the ones that they say that hatch at night and the guys fish up in Michigan and those places, out there in the dark of the moon and wait to hear a splash, that type of thing. One of the last bugs of spring, early summer, is the mahogany dun. It's another brown mayfly, 2 tails, has a slightly mottled wing, and this guy's a critter. This is He's probably the fastest swimmer of all the mayfly nymphs, and eats other nymphs. That's one of the strange things about him. They say he's probably the best swimmer. They got a pretty fly for him, which is, again, that's just a variation on a pheasant tail, and they've added some peacock. Then you have your emerger, and then you have your dun variety. I've noticed, as I've been looking at pictures for a while, to get these bugs a little more down in the film, they're cutting off that bottom half, and that'll put your fly down in the film. If you've been fishing and getting really splashy strikes but no takes, get your scissors out and cut that hackle off. Bill, you're telling me I just paid $2.25 for this bug, and you're telling me to cut it up? Yes. You notice here's the spinner. I put this one in here in particular. Notice that his tail must be at least 3 times or maybe 4 times as long as his body. And that's for a tire. There's another little hint. They're saying, put on a little longer tail as an attractor. Well, let me tell you from experience, you put on longer tails, they get bit off and you don't catch fish. So be wise on the length of the tail you put on. Again, a brown with a polypropylene wing. Then if you're up in North Carolina or on some of our northern rivers, you run into the tricos, the little bugs. They're the only one that I found that actually had gill armor plates. Kind of a cute little bug. Certainly a fun small fly to tie. I don't tie these below 20s, but they get a lot smaller than that. But the real fish to tricos is that you fish the spinner falls. And they have some pretty cool spinners for that fall. Now the last one that we see on the Saluda is what I call the true light Cahill. It's a pretty little white mayfly, and if you've been down there during the winter, you'll run into this guy. Again, it's not that ugly a spinner, but truly the dun is quite an attractive. It's a clinger and moves his fall water. And again, when I typed in light Cahill nymph, the one that came up, Hares Ear. And then you get into your dry flies. They say the classic or style light Cahill is probably in most fly boxes of fishermen in my generation. And of course you can fish the parachutes. I've never seen these in large numbers. I've seen 2 or 3 at a time. And they mix in with the BWOs in the winter. Here's BWO, spinner fall. It was on a rock down in Saluda. There's your light Cahill right there. Now, if all of this has got you cross-eyed, what I suggest to you is you take some advice from Reuben, because the squirmy worm hatch is on all the time. Thank you very much.